this might be some of my bias. I do find the most successful entrepreneurs tend to have the ability to sell, right? Now, you might have a founder that's a tech-oriented founder, an engineer, chemist, whatever. But at the end of the day, they either need to learn how to sell or they better find a business partner that can sell, or else, no one's ever going to find out about the idea and no one's ever going to buy.
Welcome to Over a Pint, where we focus on the fast-paced, never-changing world of marketing, told through the eyes of industry veterans with decades of in-the-trenches experience. No theory here in this show. This is real-world, practical experience told to you by those that have been there, and that always includes our guests. So grab a pint of your favorite local brewski or whatever your choice of drink may be, and join us for the show. As always, today I am joined by my wingman, Mr. Pat McGovern, new biz director at Acedia, an award-winning digital shop here in Milwaukee. And I'm Kurt Lingle, vice president at Celtic, a full-service award-winning ad agency, proudly headquartered in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward neighborhood. So today we are extremely excited to welcome Dave G to the Over the Pint Marketing Podcast. And Pat, we were talking a little bit before we got going. We are approaching number 60 very soon here.
Yeah, right on.
How did we pull that off? How did that happen?
It's a miracle.
The truth is we've had a lot of help.
Oh, yeah, that too.
That's how that's happened. We've had a lot of help. We've got a great team here behind the scenes that helps us pull it off, a great production team. But I will say, without great guests, the show doesn't exist. We don't have much to work with. And as I was looking through our string of podcast guests, I was just amazed at the dynamite lineup of folks that we've been able to bring on. And today really is no different. I'm excited to welcome Dave on because I think he's going to bring a pretty cool and fascinating perspective to the show. Real briefly, Dave is an Amazon best-selling author, EdTech founder, an entrepreneurship and digital marketing educator, and I will say innovator too. I'd like to, because we're going to get into that, an innovator. A launch pad director who is passionate about building entrepreneurs and innovators. If you look at his track record and his resume, this is someone that brings a legit background to the table when it comes to business experience. He's worked at some great companies and brands, but he's also rolled up his sleeves. And has had some great success in getting startups off the ground. So he knows what it takes to be in the trenches and put skin in the game. And finally, is an innovative educator in the world of digital marketing and entrepreneurship. And Pat, I think that's right up our alley because this show is about real world practical experience, less theory. So I think Dave is a perfect fit for the podcast. So Dave, welcome to Over a Pint.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
We're excited to have you. So, Dave, there is a tradition on this show. We call it Over a Pint for a reason. We go around the horn and everyone shares what type of liquid they're enjoying and we'll promote it. Beer, coffee, water, tea, it doesn't matter. What do you got for us today, Dave?
Gosh, I have actually the G Brewing Company glass here. So I used to make my own homebrew, but my two favorite breweries are Mobcraft in the Third Ward, run by Henry Schwartz, who's actually one of our UW-Whitewater former entrepreneurs. And then I live out in the Lake Geneva area. My second favorite brewery is Dusterbeck's, which is in a barn on a farm. And my favorite beer there, and it sounds awful, but it's delicious, is Nutty Bill's. It's a peanut butter porter. So there you go.
Yeah, that's great.
Wow.
Mr. McGovern, what? I don't think you're going to top that, but if you can try, what's in your glass today?
I'm not even gonna try to top that. But Kurt, I've been digging this. I've been promoting the hell out of this because I love this beer. It's Wisconsin Brewing. It's their Badger Club Amber, and this has been my go-to beer this summer, man. I just love it. So, cheers.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, very cool. Well, I was telling the both of you, I just got back from Western North Carolina, where I spent some time in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Asheville specifically, which is a place where you literally will trip over beer. It's everywhere. And I'm going to plug these guys because this is from Asheville Brewing. It's their Perfect Day IPA. This is a great brewery. It's a great beer. It's a great place. Everything about them is great. Great food, pizza, great buy. I love it. I brought a bunch of their beer back. So we'll promote them. A little bit of Asheville on the show here. So anyway, there you have it. So Dave, we're going to kick this off. Obviously, we talked to a lot of different types of people who have different types of backgrounds, but at the end of the day, the core of what Pat and I do, and really you too, it's like you as well, we're storytellers. We just kind of bring the story to life from different channels. So, and everyone's got a story. So if you could, in a few short minutes, just give us your top line story of who you are, where you came from, and then we'll kind of dig deeper.
Yeah, I'll start chronologically. So I actually grew up in England. So my mom's from London and my father is from Staffordshire in the northern part of England. I grew up there, well, till I was 7. And then we moved, my dad was in the ag business. We moved out to Spring Green, about 50 miles west of Madison.
Yeah.
American Players Theater, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yep.
I did my undergrad at Whitewater, worked for Motorola selling two-way radios door to door on the south side of Chicago, which obviously have plenty of interesting stories. That could be a podcast by itself. What job not to take straight out of school. And love Chicago, by the way. It's not a rip on Chicago. Then did my MBA at Marquette in their exec program. And I came back to Wisconsin, worked for Cellular One, which was owned by Bell South, which got acquired by USL, TDS. And then I started to teach adjunct at UW-Madison. So I taught a sales management class and then eventually taught in the MBA program, launched their digital marketing curriculum there. And then while I was doing that, I hopped from TDS to Humana, went through a downsizing. They wiped out our marketing department, which is fine. Turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Launched 2 startups, an ad agency where we helped small telecoms compete with a large cable company. So this is one of the first times I realized that I had a passion for helping the Davids compete with the Goliaths. Mm-hmm. And from there, the opportunity eventually came to teach full-time entrepreneurship at Whitewater. I live near Lake Geneva, so it's basically down the street. And there's enough flexibility where I can launch startups. So each year, and this kind of ties to my somewhat masochistic behavior, I like to launch a startup every year, and then I dissect it in front of the students, and then I have them, give input on what's going well, what's going really badly, pivots we're making, things like that. So it's like the frog of startups. So I'm dating myself by dissecting frogs, although maybe not for you guys, but for some younger audience, I might be.
Yeah, definitely for Kurt, but not for me. I don't understand what you guys are talking about, but that's okay. That's all right.
Pat, I mean, he's got nothing going on.
No, and let's just dive in. Dave,
yeah, let's do it.
Here's the first question is, and I forgot too, thank you, Kurt, for bringing this up. You're an Amazon bestselling author. So you've got so many things happening, but what really strikes me as interesting is this. You're teaching at a major university here in the state, and you're also doing startups and entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Both are very cool. Both, to me, seem just worlds apart. Like, if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not going into the academic life. I mean, it just, how explain that. Explain how you made that bridge and what appeals to you about both of those, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So obviously career paths aren't linear like they used to be 50 years ago. And so the opportunity to take the knowledge and all the bumps and the bruises and from the real world and bring that into the classroom, I just thoroughly enjoyed that. And that's the feedback I got from the students over and over again. I love this. This is real world. I mean, whether it was the undergrad students at Madison or the MBA students, they just wanted real world over and over again. And I just kind of fed off of that, right? And it wasn't just my experience. What I found out, especially when it comes to topics like digital marketing, is you can't be a digital marketing expert. When people say that, like, I want to leave the room. Like you might be an expert in SEO, maybe forms of social media. And so one of the things I did with that digital marketing class is I brought in subject matter experts from Twitter, from Salesforce, from all sorts of different companies. So it was almost like a collage of experts and bring it into the classroom. So, and like I said, in higher ed, you do have flexibility. Like over the summer, I'm working on one of my startups. So I can do that and work with the kids, when I say the kids, the students, and then bring that real world into the classroom. And I think, at my core, if you were to say why do you do what you do, it's truly about building future entrepreneurs and innovators. I mean, that's what I, really enjoy.
It's interesting. Clearly, and we knew this ahead of time, the whole, as you kind of ran through, what you do for fun. It's in your blood. This is very much in your blood. It started somewhere. Obviously, it's like you don't just. This is in your DNA. When we talk about higher education, I want to focus the question this way. Instead of asking you right now, what's the state of higher education? I want to kind of piggyback, Pat, what you were going with. It's like here we had you, Dave, with your background, what you were doing, what you enjoy doing, and you bridged it over to education, whether it was, at the university level, high school level. So you clearly, you were identifying something right there where whether it was a deficiency, whether it was because it wasn't being done before, maybe dig deeper about what really was the fire on that candle and say, you know what, I'm going to take what I'm doing and bring it over here because it ain't happening. It's not happening and we need it. Talk about it.
Yes. So it's really interesting. So I had a really good chair of the marketing department when I taught at UW-Madison. And this is when I was teaching undergrad, and I kept pressing over and over again. And this was probably, I don't know, 12 years ago, 14 years ago. And I said, look, we have to be teaching digital marketing. We have to be teaching digital marketing. And he said, we can't do it. And I'm like, why? He said, because you're going to have to update that curriculum, sometimes maybe even day to day. And it's impossible to keep it up to date. And I said, look, I've got an agency and I don't do it all myself, but I will find these experts. So we will keep this class really dynamic. And my company that I'm working on now called Startup Guides, we provide dynamic business curriculum for high schools. And now we do the same thing for high schools. So if Facebook changed an algorithm, I mean, this literally happened last year, they changed the algorithm with an ad. We cut a new video and uploaded it, and 800 kids' curriculum was updated in real time. and so the power of the tech and kind of, having subject matter experts, bringing them in allows you to, accomplish that. So, and eventually, obviously, the chair said, yes, absolutely, we need to do this. And needless to say, a lot of higher ed institutions and high schools have digital marketing and other, dynamic curriculum. But typically in higher ed, and I'll pull back the curtain and tell you some of the secrets, at least from my experience. I mean, you might get profs updating their curriculum every 2 or 3 years. I had 21 versions in 2 years because of all the changes that were going on. And it's so hard to keep it up to date when you're not, you can be a generalist, but you can't be a specialist in everything. Obviously, that's it's just impossible. So,
Dave, I applaud that you had the foresight to be thinking about this and think to me, that's just a microcosm of the way, though, that higher ed needs to be thinking, is more of a startup and less of a kind of a legacy player.
Right.
You've been in the space. Just sum it up for us. How do you view higher ed right now? I mean, where's its strengths? Because I don't want to totally beat up on it, but where are some of the speed bumps that you have seen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously higher ed and K-12 tends to be a kind of a whipping boy or a whipping person these days, which I think is generally unfair. I mean, definitely any industry, always needs to innovate. But the big, I think the big thing COVID taught us, obviously beyond the tragedies and the absolute, the horror behind it, physically and emotionally and psychologically for people, is that it forced education move online, and not just move online once. So, for example, Startup Guides, we have a charter school in Los Angeles. They went from face-to-face to fully online to hybrid to face-to-face to hybrid to online and back to face-to-face. And if you think about that, you can't just use a textbook and a freaking syllabus and pull that off, right? I mean, everything has to be digital, and they told us this, so we're like, okay, all curriculum has to be digital. It has to be done async, right? When I'm talking, not live with a teacher, teaching, and old school thinking, and some institutions and academics, still say you can only teach face-to-face, real time, or kids won't learn. Well, it's bullshit. I mean, you can. Is it as effective? Debatable, definitely debatable. Is async online for everyone? No. But the fact of the matter is, it's changing, and the institutions that haven't jumped on it, Whitewater jumped on it a long time ago. I mean, we've got, with the risk of selling Whitewater, we've got 2 studios, green screen mics, people that specialize in, our video editing. We've got all those resources, but there's large institutions and elite private institutions that haven't jumped online. And frankly, they're getting their asses kicked right now. And the result's going to be, there are going to be universities that are going to close, that I'm not going to mention names, but small lib arts that aren't well funded, for example, that don't have large foundations, that haven't jumped into online, they're going to get vaporized. And you're even going to see like mid and small state schools that don't exist, and not just because of the tech, because they don't have majors that are relevant anymore. Like if you think of the growth areas of obviously engineering, computer science, nursing, physical therapy, business, if you checked all those boxes for the things that they haven't done, I mean, they're done, right? I mean, it's like, companies in the early 2000s that you're not going to be able to make it. You're just going to get wiped off the map.
How is that, Dave? How has that changed from for the universities when they're actually marketing? Because I know what you're saying. It's like you could have a university that's in a completely different world, and they're not gonna live or thrive. And right. I'm gonna tell you another thing. What's cool about what you're talking about is everything we hear on our show from every guest, it doesn't matter what discipline it is, it doesn't matter what category they're coming from, it's all about speed. You need to do your craft with speed. And what you're talking about is your craft, and you're doing it with speed. You identified the need to do that. What are universities needing to do then as they market themselves? Because obviously the ones that are on board with this, they get it. This is an advantage, and they're speaking to a certain type of family or a certain type of student. How is, in Whitewater's case or whomever, like how is that changing? What's the message? What are you seeing out there from a marketing perspective?
The big aha moment I had, and this was probably 10 years ago. So I was teaching, so the undergrad class, or excuse me, the MBA class I was teaching at Madison, it was mid-level managers. They were coming in the evening taking courses. So they were doing marketing by day and taking digital marketing classes and all sorts of other classes. And it was the first day of class, and I'm rushing to get to class, and I just jumped on my computer, and then I typed, UW-Madison MBA program, digital marketing. And I saw an ad come up from Northwestern. I saw an ad come up for Wharton, and then one other school. I'm like, holy shit. These universities are doing geo-targeted paid search. I was like, they're in this already. That was like my big aha. I'm like, these universities have jumped on and they've got really sophisticated. And then, there's hyper aggressive stuff. There's a university in the state, I'm not going to say who, but they will put billboards within a few blocks of competitive business schools and say, tired of driving to grad school, you're wasting your time, do this from your home office. So it's getting really, really aggressive in terms of the marketing. And it's what businesses have been doing for quite some time, but now it's being applied to higher ed,
Yeah. Isn't that amazing how you're absolutely right? Like years ago, and it's years ago when you talk about an online university, and Pat, you know this is better. You both know this better than me because you have much more experience in higher ed. But when you were talking about online education, there was kind of this pause, like, huh? Online? And now, Dave, as you're describing, and Pat, as you well know, it's legit and it's real and it works. And Dave, I love where you were going with this, whether it's like, look at what's happening in just the normal business environment. I mean, it's like we're working virtually, we're working online, in some way, shape, or form. So somehow it's working and it's legitimized itself. So I find it fascinating how quickly a lot of this has really changed.
Yeah. And there's academics that, frankly, I work with one that said, I can't teach this subject matter online. Well, guess what? He did, and he can. It came down to a skill or a will thing, and he had the skill to do it, right? He just didn't have the will to do it. And you are going to see people, and you're seeing them in higher ed and K-12 that say, I can't teach online, which usually means I won't teach online. And my wife's talented and gifted and oversees curriculum instruction in the Elkhorn School District. She's responsible for the education of like 1,500 elementary school kids. And doing kindergarten online, that's tough, right? I mean, it's not going to be super practical, but it doesn't take long before, if you say, is there a way to do this asynchronously or do this hybrid? There's what's called an options program here where parents are doing more homeschooling than ever before. And then, maybe the kids will come to school 2 days a week. They're at home 3 days a week. And then when it comes to specialists, maybe they're doing synchronous video or asynchronous video to complement, homeschooling, for example.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, I'd love to pivot a little bit, and I want to dive into entrepreneurship. You mentioned that you like to, every year you said start a business. Dave, talk to me about how do you pick what you're going to go into? Like, what do you look for? What itch are you trying to scratch to say, yeah, I got something here. I want to go into this. Give us that background.
Yeah, I used to say, I know marketing, so I'm going to do marketing, right? So I had an ad agency, and then I kind of got, no offense, I got a little bored with it. And I'm like, I want to get into software. So I looked at my customers and I'm like, what needs do they have? And I bounced into providing loyalty software. And I wanted to partner with a large software company. So we partnered with Salesforce and we went out. And I'm like, I want to raise some capital. So I got a business partner. We went out and raised $500,000, which by today's standards, not a lot. But what's happened now is, I realize I've got this David versus Goliath thing, but I'm really passionate about helping education and helping prepare students for the digital age, and providing them not just good paying careers, but careers that they're really passionate about. So I'm putting a lot of energy in that. The second area, and this will, I'm on the back nine of my career, obviously, but when I'm on like hole 16, 17, and 18, I'm going to be really focusing on mental health. So I was working on a mental health startup. We interviewed like 200 psychiatrists, psychologists, high school students, and really focusing on teen suicide. So I've had someone in my family that tried to take their life almost twice, once, and then, a second time they were really close to it. And so I'm going to do something about teen suicide with a startup. I just haven't figured out a model where we can help a lot of kids in a short period of time and get through all the legal hurdles associated with it, and the supply side, which is, the therapist and the psychologist to provide it, because doing it through AI, there's just not a lot of efficacy when it comes to it, and it's fraught with liability, obviously.
So take that and let's go a little bit deeper down this rabbit hole here, and because I think this is really, really interesting. You, in the latest example, you said you had a close, a family member, right, who was a friend who's going through some pretty tough times, obviously. So that makes sense. But within that, then that's still a broad category. Dave, how do you start? What's the framework that you use to say, I'm going to look after this aspect of mental health versus this aspect? How do you kind of,
narrow it down?
Yeah,
it's a good question, right? So it's all about kind of doing discovery. And this is something I work with my students, or even if I'm coaching entrepreneurs and old people like me, I'll say, who is the group of people you want to help, right? You might have an interest, but are there a group of people you want to help? And go talk to them, right? And say, tell me about your world. Start high level. Don't ask them a bunch of leading questions to a business idea you already have. And ask them about their world. Ask the open-ended questions. And then, just like in sales, have this funnel approach and say, okay, this is a pain point. What have you done to address this pain point? What sort of services are there? Have you used them? Blah, blah, blah. And what do you think of this? And then just launching into a pilot, right? And betas, low-cost betas and pilots, and just testing it over and over and over again. And then eventually, a business model might pop out of the bottom. But if it doesn't, that's all right. You can just kind of move on to the next one.
What's interesting about your process, and some of this is based on gut too. It's not all science. It's not all, specific. And, you were kind of describing a little bit with your personal situation. It's almost like your personal why.
Right.
You hear that a lot. Your why kind of pushed you in the direction, and then your skill set took over and said, okay, my why pushed me in this direction. Now I got to figure this out with the skills that I do best. I want to stay in entrepreneurship too, and I want to talk a little bit about, when you look at business schools, back in the day it was accounting and finance and marketing was the traditionals, right? And now, you're seeing different programs come out of different business schools. I think entrepreneurship is fascinating for many reasons, especially when you think about what's going on, and just take our country. It's like business. The business climate is there because someone started it. So whether it's a small business, someone had to start that. How do you teach entrepreneurship? And I know there's classes, and I don't want to but that seems like it's like, how do you do that? Because it's like, it seems to me not everyone, there are, and maybe I just don't know what I don't know, but there's certain skills that an entrepreneur has that are just, it's inside of you. So are you, in addition to structured classes, that's trying to pull that out of people, those intangibles? Talk through that, Dave.
Yeah, I think, a lot of academics believe this, and, and I do as well. And I think you guys, might have used this term before, but it's all about building this entrepreneurial mindset. And you get different definitions of it. But in my world, that's identifying a group of people you want to help, figuring out what their particular pain point is, and knowing that there's some sort of solution there, even though you haven't figured out what it is yet. So we do something called a bug list in my intro to entrepreneurship class. And they're like, tell me something that bugs you. And then they come up with ideas around that. And so you try and shift people's, natural inclination is this is a problem. I'm going to give up and move on to the next thing. Instead, we talk about magnetizing yourself to that problem and saying there is a solution and we're going to roll with this. And so, there are the classes, but things like pitch competitions. So we have pitch competitions, for example, at Whitewater, there's plugging, elevator pitch competition, business plan competition. We have a social entrepreneurship org, which I'm part of, Enactus. And these students are working with a company in Madison and a group in India, and they've developed an app to help prevent blindness in rural India, right? And you can imagine not only the impact that these kids are having, which is huge, but you imagine if hiring a student and you're like, what did you do during college? Well, I helped cure blindness in India. And you're like, holy shit, I want to hire you. The interview is over because you're like, okay, they probably understand finance, law, they're innovative as hell, they know how to market, they know how to sell, and they know digital app development. And so you start, the kids that I see coming out, and again, students, not just entrepreneurship majors, but the ones that go through that, the one sort of company they don't want to work for is a faceless, vanilla, large corporation. They want to launch their own, they're working for a family business, or they're going and working for highly scalable companies. So we have one student that worked for Bird, the electric scooter company, which is the fastest growing startup of all time in terms of cap value. So the fastest to 1 billion, 2 billion, and 3 billion. And we have two of the students that were employee 4 and 15. We have another student that works for Bolt, who was the fastest growing fintech company last year. So those companies want these students, and these students thrive on these sort of jobs. You know, they don't want a traditional job.
Dave, when you work with students, and even in your own experience, what are the couple traits that you have to be good at in order to be successful in entrepreneurship?
Right.
Like, you know, I've got my theories, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, creativity and just intestinal fortitude. Like the students that I work with, that I thrive on working with, and a lot of our entrepreneurship students, I have to put a leash on them and pull them back and say, okay, look, this isn't working here. Let's go this direction. And then they're like, you know, bloodhounds, and they will chase. And then I'm like, okay, here, let's come back. Let's do this. So, you know, some students, you're like, okay, gosh, you know, you need to keep up this syllabus, this assignment's late. These are just the opposite, right? And this is where I really enjoy it, because their pursuit of an idea and generally helping people is just relentless. And they do have some innate creativity. They don't have to be the loudest talkers, and they don't have to have, you know, amazing written communication skills. They don't have to be great accountants. You know, generally, and this might be some of my bias, I do find the most successful entrepreneurs tend to have the ability to sell, right? Now, you might have a founder that's a tech-oriented founder, an engineer, chemist, whatever, but at the end of the day, they either need to learn how to sell, or they better find a business partner that can sell, or else, you know, no one's ever going to find out about the idea, and no one's ever going to buy. So
what I love about what I'm hearing is, regardless of what field you go into, I'm like nodding my head. It's like, that's exactly what a company wants. It's like, those are the types of young professionals coming into any organization. And I hear what you're saying. It's like someone with that type of background, they probably would die at a large faceless vanilla, like you said. But I'll tell you what, you're right. It's not just the startup, it's the family business, like you said. It's an agency. You want people coming in with a perspective, a point of view, some fire, fearless to some degree, not reckless. But I think it's very, very cool. Let's move on a little bit. I want to get into a little bit, and we talked a little bit about this when we met for the first time, and we made a point to talk about this, but the student makeup, in terms of not just who they are, but the volume, the quantity, you know, it's changing. And there's, as we talked about, and the cliff, as you say, you know, it's the 2025 cliff, I believe. It's going to change the game dramatically. Can you talk through that a little bit, and then also how that will impact the universities?
Sure. Yeah, so the 2025 cliff, if people aren't familiar, obviously we know about the economic collapse of 2008. You add 17 years to that, that's obviously 2025. Well, what happened 2008, people started having fewer kids. And so that started impacting K-12. And there's, 2025, there's going to be a significant drop off in the number of high school students graduating. And that, if you're looking at from a market perspective and you're in higher ed, means that supply, and we're already seeing it, is shrinking. Now, there's exceptions to the rule. So if this is a really bad visual, if this is, I guess it would be Florida, and Texas would be here. But for those states that are bordering Latin America, they can make up some of that decrease, with the influx of immigrants. And I'm not going to get into the whole politics side of it. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. It's, it's there. So states like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, this isn't going to impact them. The elite schools, and I'm talking the Stanfords, the U Chicagos, the Ivy Leagues, if you've got an acceptance rate of 6%, you're not going to have to worry, right?
Right.
But big state U or, mid-sized state universities in the Midwest, Plain states, Northeast, they're really scared right now. And so, the clever ones are saying, all right, what are the majors that we need to offer? And, business, nursing, computer science, engineering, frankly, what are some of the majors that need to go, right? And, the risk of, I'm not trying to denigrate, but a lot of, parents and students and saying, I'm not going to do a lib arts degree because I can't make money right away. And again, I'm not judging. I have a lot of great friends that did lib arts and they've been very successful and they're happy. So there's my disclaimer on that. But you're going to see universities fold, the ones that haven't done online, the ones that aren't offering, the degrees that are in demand, the ones that aren't aggressively marketing, they're going to go, right? And it's something jaws are going to drop in the next few years. They're like, wait, that university can't just shut down. I mean, it's going to be, campuses are going to look like Detroit, where you're going to be like driving past, and there's going to be some ghost towns universities. And I'm not going to mention names. I mean, there's all sorts of predictions, but it's going to happen. But it's just kind of natural attrition, right? I mean, Darwin's sitting back and laughing right now because he's seeing what's going to happen in higher ed, no different than it's happened in business for decades. So
I think it's fascinating. I think it's going to no doubt change the market. It gets back to what we talked about earlier, how universities markets.
Yep.
How clever are they when marketing? Because the pool is less. What is your take? So with all of this happening, what is your take then, if I might ask, let's call it what it is. I think it's tuition inflation. I mean, it's like, so this is going on. You've got universities that are some are getting with the program. They're offering smarter, more effective, more useful degrees, right, programs. Others aren't. I mean, it's crazy with tuition. What is your thought? Is that going to follow too?
I mean, some of the inflation piece is perception, not reality. And obviously we're in Wisconsin here, and I know the podcast is going global, but there's been, within the UW system, there's been a tuition freeze since 2018 or 2013. So tuition has not gone up at UW system schools since 2013. And obviously costs have, right? I mean, labor costs, and primarily universities, a lot of their costs are labor. And yes, there's building and athletics and all those other elements. So it used to exceed inflation, but it's literally been at zero at the UW system schools. Now, private schools, different. Out-of-state schools, different. Schools that are, pure online, different. But, one of the things that is definitely happening is there is downward pressure on pricing like never before. And so NIU, for example, Northern Illinois University, they've got billboards in Wisconsin saying no out-of-state tuition. I don't know if you've seen these, before.
Yep.
You've got, universities like Cornell offering, certificate programs. Certificates are really hot, right? It might be three credit classes, but they're $5,000 a piece. And people, obviously want to get knowledge. They might want to get it from professors at Cornell. Some want the logo on their LinkedIn, right? So the first thing you see is Harvard. Well, okay, great. You took a symposium class. It was 3 days there, but and obviously these institutions have great educational offerings as well. But the market is just crazy, and it's just going to be survival of the fittest / I would say flexible.
Hey, Dave, give me your take then, because I totally agree with you. I think there's going to be a bloodbath. I think there's going to be a lot of fallout with universities, both public and private. Okay, assuming that we're right? Are the bigger institutions, are they capable of then absorbing those students who went to, some of the mid to smaller places? Now, are they going to take these on? Because on the one side, it's like, okay, I could see the fallout happening. Got it. But at the same time, we need to educate more people here in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those people go who are going to a smaller, let's say 1,500 student college in the middle of the country, right? Where's their new home?
Well, so again, at the risk of being too Wisconsin-centric, I mean, when the UW system was set up, I believe they wanted a campus available within a 1-hour drive of anybody, within the state of Wisconsin. But, that could change in the future. And you say, where do those kids go? Well, our notion of where do they go, if you finish that sentence is, where are they going to go if they have to drive to get there, right? If you say, well, they don't have to drive to get there, they might be taking it through the internet, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Some of the large universities also are going to be getting smaller. So you're starting to see, specific majors at universities shut down. You're going to start to see colleges within universities shut down and new ones pop up, right? I mean, if I was to create Dave's U right now, I would have an elite computer science program with online offerings. I'd have a nursing school where the first year can be taken online. And I'd probably have actuary science, cybersecurity, and accounting, right? I mean, that would create like a hyper university. And I would go out and find the best professors in the world, plus people like you, subject matter experts. I'd bring them in and, take an LMS, a learning management system. And frankly, you'd probably have this online in a few months. So the world's changed.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like your next business, Dave.
Yeah.
If I was on the front nine, maybe if I was on the front nine, not the back nine. That's a big one.
Well, because you also talked about this too when we met. We were talking a little bit about the teacher shortage. There's an issue up there. So does this long term kind of fix itself? Because in theory, if we're talking about less institutions, right now there's a need.
Right.
But talk about the teacher shortage, but does this fix itself, or where are we at with that?
So let me break out higher ed and K-12. So in higher ed, there are certain supply problems in certain areas like accounting, actuary science, nursing. It's brutally hard to find those people. And one of the reasons you say, well, why them? Well, because they can find jobs where sometimes they can make multiples of the income in higher ed in the private sector. And so to get someone that's a CPA to say, hey, would you like to go get your PhD, do that for 5-6 years, and then make a third of what you're making now? Well, some will say yes, because I have summers, air quote, off, and I'll get hung up for saying that. But and flexibility and things like that. But when you look and I think when you think about virtual and online higher ed, I'm not as concerned in general. Where I have big concern is K-12. For example, my wife, I told you she works in the Elkhorn Area School District. She used to teach in Waterford. They would have elementary school teacher, over 100 applicants for a job. They just posted one, and I think they had 6. And so that shortage, it's like scary small, right? And, schools are saying, hey, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And my question is, so what are you going to do about it, right? So, and I saw this happening a little bit with K-12 and a little bit in higher ed a few years ago. So I bought freeagentprofs.com and freeagentteachers.com because I didn't know what the business was going to look like, but I knew there was going to be an opportunity. So startup guides, we actually might start piloting freeagentteachers.com, which would be like getting subject matter experts like you, provide a curriculum and a syllabus, and then you could have multiple high schools, kids coming online, and you could teach them digital marketing. And then a couple weeks later, we might have some marketing automation people coming in. And a couple weeks later, we might have, Facebook and Twitter coming in and teaching them.
Wow.
So
that's so smart, Dave.
There's
so smart.
Going to have to be flexibility.
So smart. And what a great side hustle for a number of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them, they might be burned out and they want to quit, or maybe they're retired. I can't tell you how many young teachers coming out of College of Ed or, where I say, hey, because I've started to do discovery on this. I've said, if you could live anywhere in the world, name the number of hours you want to teach, and you just have to have an internet connection. How interesting does that sound to you? And I said, how much would I make? And I said, well, that's up to you. It would go to the highest bidder. And they're like, I'm there. Money is not the one, for Gen Z especially, it's not the number one factor. They want to go digital nomad, right? Grab that freaking laptop, the mic, and the smartphone, one-way ticket to, wherever, Bangkok, and I'll start working next week.
I love it. I love it.
Hey, Dave, as we kind of come towards the end here a little bit, I guess, what excites you about, and you might have answered this, because you've touched on it a little bit here and there, but I guess what excites you about tomorrow, and what keeps you up at night? I love asking guests that.
Sure. The thing that I love about working with students is their creativity, adaptability, grasp of tact. And this last one is the focus on doing social good in others. I've seen a quantum leap forward in the last few years. Wow. They'll look at the needs of other people before themselves. And as much as they get ripped from, hey, they've got a short attention spans. True. We have to do videos that are 6 to 10 minutes. You can't do 40-minute videos anymore, right? And so, it's more challenging to teach in some areas. But, when a student comes up to me and says, hey, I want to help this group of people and come up with a business. Can you help me help them? I'm just like, yes, I can. And they're like, how? And I said, I don't know, but we'll go find some people and let's figure out how to help them. That's pretty powerful. So I'm really optimistic about, the students I see coming to universities these days. I'm optimistic about all the opportunities with the web. I think, blockchain has a lot of opportunities for, education and new businesses as well. I think you're seeing our government, and again, not going political, I think pushing things through like this chip bill, where they're like, hey, we need to produce more semiconductors here, and it doesn't matter what political side you land on. It's tough to argue with that. And so I see government making some good decisions before. So I'm generally very positive. I am very positive about the future of the U.S. and the world and the next generation.
Awesome. So that's awesome. Dave, as we wrap here, then I guess as we always do, we always give the final words to our guests. So anything you want to share,
sure,
plug, promote, anything we didn't ask you that you wish we would have. This is your minute, your final hour.
Yeah, so I'm going to do one final thought and then I'll do a plug. So my mom and father grew up in England, and during the Blitzkriegs, when the Nazis were bombing London, my mom went down to the underground with her mother and my aunt. And my grandfather, her father, was digging bodies out of the rubble from the Blitzkriegs. And while they were down there, Churchill had his famous speech. I mean, the Nazis were coming, right? The U.S. hadn't, jumped in at that point. And he said, we'll fight in the seas, we'll fight in the fields, we'll fight in the streets. We'll never, never, never give up. And I think, with all the challenges we have everywhere in the world, and whether it's COVID or politically or in our businesses or in education, that's just like resonates with me. And I've gone through tough times in my life, just like everybody has. But I think that quote just embodies more than ever before something that, we all need to remember that, this too will pass and we can get through tough times. In terms of the plug piece, I am working on Startup Guides, which is startupguides.co. And we provide dynamic high school business education. We launched with our digital marketing class, which started its life as the MBA digital marketing class at UW-Madison. And then we've got a brand new introduction entrepreneurship class, which began its life as an entrepreneurship class at UW-Whitewater. We're providing these resources to teachers so they can provide the best possible education. And we're going to have more curriculum that we're adding to that. So that, I guess, wraps it up.
Well, we will make sure to, in the copy, the post copy, we'll make sure that we have the URL for Startup Guides. We'll make sure that you are tagged accordingly so folks can find you on LinkedIn if that's the best way is that the best way for folks if they want to connect with you directly, LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good. We'll have it on there. So, on that note, this show is coming to an end. Dave, I can't thank you enough.
Thank you guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
We talked about so much. It was fascinating. It was practical. It was real world. This was exactly what Pint is all about. And I can't thank you enough for sharing some time with us and some insights. So you've been a fantastic guest. Come back anytime.
Oh, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Until next time, folks, this has been Pint with David G. Take care, everyone. Cheers.